For those of us living in the Northern Hemisphere, June 21st is the summer solstice, but it's also World Humanist Day for everybody. Today I'm talking briefly about the history of humanism. Those who consider themselves humanist are estimated to number between 4 and 5 million worldwide. So what is humanism and where did it come from? It's from the word humanities that we get the word humanism. Cicero is often cited as having coined the term humanities, which is best defined as that which distinguishes humans from all other creatures, the ability to reason, to speak, and to create laws that allow us to live peacefully in societies. Humanities spread from Italy throughout Europe in the mid-15th century, and by the 16th century it was the dominant intellectual movement. The life philosophy we call humanism today centers on humankind, rejects the idea or belief in divine deities. Because many humanists classify themselves as agnostic, people who don't know if there are gods or a god, or as atheists, people who don't believe in gods or a god, or all three, and often speak about science and reason, it's not uncommon for people to misclassify them as belonging to a religion or belonging to a theology of science. I think this claim has 4 possible points of origin. The Enlightenment, aka the Age of Reason. The Enlightenment was an intellectual and cultural movement in the 18th century that emphasized reason over supernaturalism and science over blind faith. It was also a time when people in communities started really taking an interest in taking care of their fellow human beings. Theologian Friedrich Nietzsche used the term humanism to describe an education based on the study of classic literature, which was all the rage at the time. In his 1803 book, The Dispute Between Philanthropism and Humanism in the Educational Theory of Our Time, the use of the word humanism became mainstream when German historian Georg Voigt used humanism for the description of the first century of the Renaissance. You may have heard the term secular humanist. Some humanists take issue with the term because theologians started using it first to label humanists. Non-religious organizations began using the word secularism after George Hawkins coined it in 1851 to describe, quote, a form of opinion which concerns itself only with questions the issues of which can be tested by the experience of this life. We don't see the term secular humanist in use much until the 1930s, and that's probably because a little American upstart called the American Humanist Association published the Humanist Manifesto in 1933. I imagine more than a theologian's eyebrow was raised when they saw people who had signed the document declaring themselves to be religious humanists. In 1943, the then Archbishop of Canterbury, William Temple, was reported as writing that the, quote, Christian tradition was in danger of being undermined by, quote, secular humanism, end quote, which hoped to retain Christian values without Christian faith. I'm just demonstrating a way that the term has been used by theologians in the past. According to the American Humanist Association, those who see humanism as philosophy are secular humanists, while those who see it as a religion are religious humanists. It could be a hangover from the 1980s. In 1987, William Hand, a United States District Judge for the Southern District of Alabama, probably still upset about a Supreme Court decision, Wallace versus Jeffries, ruled that 44 textbooks used in Alabama schools promoted secular humanism and as such violated the Establishment Clause of the United States Constitution. I found a write-up of Hand that said he was one of the most important conservative intellectuals of the culture wars, whose significance is rarely recognized. All Hand's ruling really did was leave Americans wondering what this secular humanism religion was and gave TV Christians like Pat Robinson something to point to and say, that's bad. A narrative that humanists and their allies had already been battling for a while, even with satire. The 11th Circuit later unanimously overruled Hand. Some people use this case and others that made it to the Supreme Court as proof that secular humanism is an actual religion because the Supreme Court said so. I found no evidence of the Supreme Court ruling anything a religion. I only found the Supreme Court ruling laws passed by states and often habitually promoted by Christians as being unconstitutional, frequently violating the First and 14th Amendments. The ideas bundled together to create humanism have been around since at least 1500 BCE. At about this time, the Rigveda, the first of the Hindu Vedas, was being written. The Rigveda contains one of the earliest known passages declaring agnosticism. But after all, who knows and who can say whence it all came and how creation happened? The gods themselves are later than creation. So who knows truly whence it has arisen? From this point forward, and in many cultures around the world, we find evidence suggesting that there have been those willing to question supernatural faith, like Epicurus, rejecting the possibility of an afterlife and embracing scientific inquiry to learn about the nature of the universe. Given how eager ancients were to burn anything or one they didn't agree with, we may never know precisely how prolific or how far back in time dissent and blind faith reaches. Two core tenets of humanism are empathy and compassion for others, arguably very human characteristics. It is therefore easy to see why contemporary humanists point to the ubiquity of humanist ideologies across time and space as a sign that such a system of looking at the world is natural. According to Humanist International, World Humanist Day is a way of spreading awareness of humanism as a philosophical life stance and means to effect change in the world. It is also seen as a time for humanists to gather socially and promote the positive values of humanism. Those values are to live without theism or other supernatural beliefs. Humanists believe they have the ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment and prioritize human welfare over happiness. The holiday developed in the 1980s as several chapters of the American Humanist Association began to celebrate it. It wasn't until the American Humanist Association and Humanist International passed matching resolutions declaring World Humanist Day to be on the Northern Hemisphere summer solstice that the day became a collaborative international celebration in the early 90s. There is no one way or set traditional method to celebrate World Humanism Day, and the community really seems to like its lack of dogma. A simple gathering such as a picnic or a dinner are pretty typical. Some groups, more on the religious humanism side of the spectrum, have developed intricate rituals that include music and proceedings, highlighting the metamorphic symbolism of the solstice and the light as knowledge, which brings us out of the darkness, ignorance. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. That tells the YouTube algorithm to recommend it to others watching similar content. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.